They put on a brave face in Paris. Ministers from anti-ISIS coalition countries meeting to review their strategy nearly 1 year after jihadists took over vast swathes of Iraq and Syria. Airstrikes have had only a limited effect, what with the recent rout of the Iraqi army from Ramadi, the capital of Anbar province. ISIS still holds that country's second city, Mosul, and now nearly half of Syria's territory. The jihadists are not invincible. Kurdish fighters pushed them out of the Syrian border town of Kobani, and Iranian-backed militias drove them from Saddam Hussein's hometown of Tikrit. The Kurds and Iran, who did not have official seats in Paris, asymmetrical allies for an asymmetrical war, with hundreds of young Europeans still willing to answer the call of the jihadists, as witnessed with last January's terror attacks in the French capital. The question posed to Barack Obama last summer still resonates. What's the strategy for winning, both on the battlefield and over the airwaves and the internet, in what the world is realizing to be a new kind of war? Today in the France 24 debate, is it back to the drawing board for the fight against ISIS? And with us, French Senator Nathalie Goulet. She chairs the Upper Chamber's Commission on Jihadist Network. Welcome back.
Good evening.
Welcome back as well to Christopher Dickey, foreign editor at the Daily Beast.
Pleasure.
We're also joined today by Camille Grand, director of the Paris-based Foundation for Strategic Research. Nice to see you again, sir.
Good evening.
And from Washington, he's a former U.S. Army officer who acted as military advisor. Michael Pregent, many thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation, and you have on Facebook and Twitter our hashtag F24debate. It was 1 year ago today that we saw, Christopher Dickey, this takeover of Mosul. And we've had, I guess during the Vietnam War, they called it the credibility gap between what's been said about how the campaign is going and what we've witnessed actually on the grounds since. How would you say it's going?
Badly, very badly. Look, the problem a year ago is still the problem today, which is that the Iraqi army, the government's army, is essentially a hollow institution. It's deeply corrupt. Its soldiers have been unwilling to fight. Mosul was not a battle, remember. Mosul just gave up. They disappeared. They ran away, although they vastly outnumbered the troops that were coming after them from ISIS or Daesh. In Ramadi, they had held out much longer, the government troops, but at the end of the day, maybe 150, 200 Daesh people defeated 10 times that number in Ramadi. How does that happen? How does that happen when there's no air cover for the Daesh troops? They don't have any anti-aircraft capability. The coalition is bombing the hell out of them, and still they defeat the Iraqi army? I think the answer is the Iraqi army is worthless.
They're at the talks in Paris. You could say that the Iraqi prime minister answered in kind, saying not enough has been done on the part of the international community.
Why? If they're not going to fight, the international community is not going to fight this war for them. That's the one thing that Obama's clear about. The United States is not going to go in and fight this war for the Iraqi government, especially since the Iranians take credit for every little victory the Iraqi government is involved in.
They deserve it.
I'm sorry?
They deserve it.
The Iranians do.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Nathalie Goulet, you're saying the Iranians are doing more than the Americans?
Well, first of all, we have to remember that American people in 2003 put the mess in the area first, so they have to fix it. You know, somebody has to fix it.
They spent 8 years fixing it.
They try. But they have
and couldn't do it.
They have to think it before.
So they should be like the French, they should colonize Iraq? Is that what you want?
No, but maybe they have to take their responsibility, and we have to remember. And then coalition.
Is that like France is going to fix Libya now?
I think they have, too.
Oh, well, okay,
yes.
Good luck with that.
No, but, you know, the people who put the mess have to fix it at one period of time. But what is new is more than 10,000 foreign fighters in addition to the rest. And I think that what we have to face is also this problem of the foreign fighters that create another problem into the problem.
Michael Pregent, your thoughts on this?
Well, I look at the problems in Iraq right now, and Prime Minister Abadi... You can't hear me? Prime Minister Abadi in Paris is saying that the People's Mobilization Units are actually falling under Iraqi command when that's not true at all. They're falling under militia command, and they're falling by relation under the command of the Iranians that are on the ground, the Quds forces. You can't take back Sunni areas without Sunni forces, and the Sunni forces needed to fight. Baghdad doesn't trust them, and Baghdad is leaving them to face ISIS alone.
So on this point in time, what does the United States do? You heard the exchange between Christopher Dickey and Nathalie Goudet.
Well, the United States needs to hug Baghdad tighter than Tehran is hugging Baghdad. We need to arm and advise the Sunni tribes that killed al-Qaeda during the surge. But that's going to require a protracted commitment by the U.S., along with the international community, to get in Baghdad, develop this force to stand in the way. You got to remember, Ramadi is only 70 miles from Baghdad. The Shia forces are massing in Habaniya, which is between Fallujah and Ramadi. So ISIS is already in Fallujah. They're only one neighborhood away in Abu Ghraib to being in western Baghdad. Something needs to be done now to get in the way of ISIS before it becomes something else.
Let me bring in
Sunni armed resistance. Yeah, sorry about that.
Let me bring in Camille Grand on this. Camille, the Associated Press quoting a senior U.S. diplomat at the talks in Paris as saying the coalition will make it easier to get weapons to the Iraqi soldiers that need them. Your reaction to that?
The key is obviously that's one part of the solution to improve the quality and the training and the equipment of the Iraqi forces, which was the big demand of the Iraqi Prime Minister in Paris. But of course, that doesn't solve the politics of all of this. So the inclusiveness of the coalition on the ground and the fact that this can't be left only to the Shia militia to fight the fight is critical. In terms of military input from outside members of the coalition, primarily the US, but also US allies, I'm not sure additional bombings would make a huge difference because there's been already about 4,000 strikes on ISIS. The coalition has been very careful not to create casualties amongst Sunni people on the ground, so they've been having a very targeted bombings so that they are not accused of missing their target.
But on that point, we're hearing that there aren't many airstrikes, and that part of the reason is they don't have good intelligence.
Exactly. The problem is that
there are no eyes on the ground.
There could be much more strikes if there was enough intelligence and if there were enough targets. And ISIS doesn't provide the same sort of targets than an Iraqi army or a large army would provide. So that's one element. The second element is about how to help the Iraqi army. Part of it is equipment, so that they regain the equipment they've lost in Mosul and all of that. But part of it is also the training. And there, I think the key is to go down from the division to the battalion level. The sort of currently there are about 3,000 trainers in Iraq. We probably need about 3 times that number, which are not necessarily fighting troops, but are the sort of troops that would enable the Iraqi army to restore progressively itself as an army.
The problem is that there was a functioning army in 2010, or 2009, 2010, but under the Maliki government, which was the same party, by the way, that the present prime minister belongs to, the armed forces were eviscerated. The commanders were taken out because the government didn't trust them because of basically of sectarian concerns. They wanted their own cronies in there. Those officers then took payments from their soldiers so that those soldiers wouldn't have to fight. So you would have a unit that was supposed to have 500 people in it, and it would only have 200 people in it. Why? Because the commanders were taking money from the other 300 so they wouldn't have to fight. That kind of rot you don't fix overnight, and that rot is political. That's not a rot that's caused by materiel. It's not caused by training. It's caused by deep corruption at the very top of the Iraqi state.
You don't fix it overnight, but you need to. If as Michael was saying, you've got ISIS 70 kilometers from Baghdad.
Well, Michael's right about the dangers. But on the other hand, I don't think that the United States is in a position to stop that from happening. In fact, who is going to stop it from happening? Iran is going to stop it from happening.
Absolutely.
And Iran will take credit for it, even if the United States coordinates with them.
But at the same time, Ayatollah Khomeini says that there is no border anymore. First of all, there is no border anymore between Syria and Iraq. I was on the field. There's no border anymore. And then they say, Iraqi are our brother. I mean, they really want to fight because they have to protect their own borders. But I think that one point that we have to face is also the financing. I think that one of the main issue would be the financing. Because if we are able, international community is able to stop the financing, I think we will make a big step ahead.
The financing of the jihadists.
Yes.
Michael Pregent.
Yes, yeah. What I wanted to say is Iran cannot stand in the way of ISIS right now, moving into Sunni neighborhoods. As soon as Shia militias are injected into Sunni neighborhoods, they see no difference between a Sunni military-aged male and ISIS. That's the biggest problem. They're charging into these areas wearing green bandanas with Khomeini plastered to the windshields of Humvees and flying Asab al-Haq and Katab Hezbollah banners. This has a very alienating effect. The closer ISIS gets to Baghdad, the more sectarian this government looks. And there is no Iraqi army left. It was basically Badr commanders and Jaish al-Mahdi service members who are now leaving the Iraqi army and joining the militias that they never left in the first place.
All right, an asymmetrical war with, by the way, another variable in all of this, which is Syria. And one of the interesting points, Camille Grand, at this conference today was you get the sense that the fault lines in Syria are shifting with the Assad government looking weaker than it did a while back, the Assad government backed by Iran.
No, the situation is, of course, what's making the situation extraordinarily complicated is that we have a coalition that doesn't have the exact same objectives in Iraq and Syria, and that have separate views with regard to the face of Assad, and so on. So you have the Iranians, which are, as we say, probably the thing holding the front line together in Iraq, and the Iranians are backing the Assad and helping Assad stand together with their Hezbollah proxies in Syria. So you have a situation where obviously Iran has more influence in Syria than the Russians and more influence in Iraq than the Americans. So that's making things extraordinarily complicated because Iran doesn't have the same agenda as we do on this, and the enemies of our enemies are not always our friends in the region. So putting this aside, I mean, the situation in Iraq is in Syria itself is extremely fragile because indeed Assad is only holding, thanks to Hezbollah militia that are backing him, Russian weaponry and Iranian support. The Iranians are now the sort of backbone of the Syrian security forces, to which they provide training and not only ideological backing, but also pure military backing on the ground. So that leaves a situation where those who say we should now side with Assad against the jihadis are siding with a weaker partner, and I'm not sure this is the solution to the mess in Syria, which is still there.
On that score, we can listen to what some of those at that conference were saying, most notably when it comes to the jihadists taking advantage of the power vacuum in Syria to grow.
The stabilization of Iraq will not be fully completed if there is not a political transition in Syria, since now the borders were shattered, and we know Daesh is on both sides of the border. In Palmyra, recently, the Syrian regime has shown once again that it had neither the capacity nor the genuine will to protect its territory against terrorism.
And that's where Australia's foreign minister feels there was a chair missing at the table in Paris. Julie Bishop telling the Australian newspaper that Tehran should have been invited, saying that on that score, the Iranians are doing much of the fighting, but we're not hearing from them as to what their objectives are. We must have one of their military commanders and political leaders at the table informing us of what Iran is doing there. Michael Pregent, a fair point?
Well, his name is Qasem Soleimani, and he's not at the table because he's in Baghdad, and he's leading Shia militias in the fight to take back territory. I don't think there's really any effort or any strategic effort by the Iranians to take back Sunni areas. I don't think there's any design to see Iraq a nation state again. I think their fractured state policy, as we're seeing in Syria, is to protect the Assad regime.
But yes or no, should they have been invited to Paris?
No. what the international community should tell them is stop meddling in Iraq. Protect the Shia areas, that's fine. Protect the holy sites, yes. But I mean, it would have been great to be there, but they would have overshadowed a body. A body's supposed to be the guy. Iran would have overshadowed a body, in my opinion.
Nathalie Goulet.
Well, if I may, there is such an amount of mistrust with Iran that we don't face the reality of the subject. And one of a sudden, there is this missing chair and empty chair, but we have to discuss with Iran on this subject. I was in DC last week. And of course, the mistrust is very important with the states. It's very difficult to reset, because Iran is part of a lot of problems.
And with the French, by the way, successive administrations.
It's worst, but Fabius doesn't like Iran. It's like an oyster every time we speak about Iran.
Sarkozy was
the same. But we have to face the reality. Iran will be back in the picture soon.
Yeah, but which Iran? I mean, actually, who would have come here from Iran? Javad Zarif. Now, he's in the midst of the nuclear negotiations with the United States. Do we think Zarif wants to be held accountable for what Qasem Soleimani is doing? No, because there's two Irans, basically, that we're talking about.
One of the issue here is that Zarif is not in charge of Iraq and Syria.
This is the Iranian foreign minister.
The Iranian foreign ministry has nothing to do
with
that. So that's the problem. Is having Zarif at the table doesn't solve the problem or doesn't
bring Jalili or somebody else. They have a lot of knowledgeable people able to talk about that.
But they have a lot of people that we like, but the people that are making problems in Iraq are Qasem Soleimani, his Quds force. They are the ones that answer directly to Khomeini. They're not the ones that are going to be able to win over Western audiences. Well, maybe they can, but Qasem Soleimani is the reason.
Offensive these days, Michael. Have you seen his Instagram account? It's amazing.
No, he is.
If Iran would have been a simple case, it would have been so easy. But Iran is Iran. It's a Persian world.
We haven't mentioned the Kurds, by the way.
Yeah.
The Kurds, who are the other force that are fighting,
and Turkey,
that are fighting Daesh. We haven't mentioned Turkey, but the Kurds are fighting Daesh. But why? Because the Kurds want to secure their own borders now. And their own borders include Kirkuk, but they don't include Mosul. That's why we kept hearing about this big offensive that was going to be led against Mosul. It's not going to happen. Not anytime soon, maybe never, because the Kurds are not interested in losing any people in that fight.
Absolutely.
The key is that, in fact, on the ground, you have those who are on the borders and don't want to fight, like the Turks or the Saudis. They don't. No one want to put a boot on the ground in Syria or in Iraq because they know it's a quagmire. You have those who are securing their area but are not ready to be on the offensive. I mean, typically the Kurds, the larger Kurdistan they can secure, the happier they are, but they're not going to run to Ramadi in the middle of, or Mosul in the middle of Sunniland.
No, exactly.
And then you have the Iranians who are there to prevent their proxies to fall apart in both countries, but that's a short-term objective.
And what do they all say? They all say, why is the United States not helping us out?
Yeah.
Why is the United States not solving this problem for us? Well I can tell you why, because of everything you just said.
The one group we didn't mention was the Sunnis. I mean, when ISIS faced Peshmerga or Kurds in Kobani or Peshmerga in the Mosul Dam, they lost. When they faced a motivated Shia militia, PMU, coupled with the Iraqi security forces in Tikrit, they lost. Yeah. The problem is there is no Sunni force in Ramadi willing to fight ISIS because it doesn't have arms and Baghdad doesn't trust it.
No.
Well, just so. I mean, that's the problem that goes way back to the evisceration of the military by Maliki.
So we go back to Maliki on this, and the problem is that the sort of Sunni awakening that would be necessary to fight back ISIS in the Sunni areas is a sort of midterm project, and it involves first the Iraqi government, then probably the Americans to resume their network within those tribes, the ones that successfully...
Yeah, effectively in 2006-07, they
successfully
paid these tribes to switch sides.
Yep.
Well, and the tribes are willing to do it, too, for all kinds of reasons. But the problem with that is that why would they trust us or any of these people again? They've already, as they see it, they've already been completely betrayed.
Because the Iraqi government kicked out the United States in 2011?
The United States was left in 2011, had no encouragement to stay at all, and the Iraqi government then proceeded to cut off all the funding to these groups to these Sunni groups, to start pressuring the political figures from those groups, accusing them of terrorism, forcing them out of the government. It was all a power play essentially by Iran. Why would they trust anybody now?
All right, we've talked about
And
how...
leaving them open to reprisal attacks by al-Qaeda, by Shia militias, then by ISIS when they came back in. They targeted all the Sons of Iraq leaders, all the Sahwa leaders. And now the Shia militias are doing it again. So not only do they not trust Baghdad, they don't trust the U.S. because we promised them that wouldn't happen. We promised them 20% would be integrated into the Iraqi army, and that never happened.
One glimpse of hope that is in the picture is the fact that the Grand Ayatollah Sistani, the leading Shiite figure in Iraq, has spoken in favor of national reconciliation, which, it might be words, but at least it sends a signal that from the clerics in Iraq, there is a sense that the falling apart of the entire system is not bad, and probably it has to do with the fact that the Shia still think that they can be the leading force in a united Iraq rather than keeping their zone.
Well, except that Sistani and Tehran are at odds on all these issues.
Yes,
so then we get into the whole fight between the Sistani faction and the Khamenei faction.
Everybody around has a different agenda. So it's very difficult. And then some people support some groups at one period of time, and all of a sudden they cannot support them anymore. And then we have to deal also with the GCC country, and then we have to deal with Iran. Back to the picture. I mean, it's like a Rubik's Cube, It's extraordinarily complicated.
We've picked apart thoroughly the weaknesses in this anti-IS coalition. How strong is ISIS itself? Not as much as you might think. That's the argument of the number 2 of the State Department, Anthony Blinken, filling in for an injured John Kerry.
Good reports today with each of the lines of effort that are at the heart of the work of this coalition: to shrink Daesh's territory, to cut its funding, to curb its recruiting, and to expose the gigantic gap between what Daesh claims to be and what it actually is.
Camille Grand, is it true? Is ISIS less powerful than it seems?
ISIS has enormously benefited from the weakness of its adversary and the division of its adversary. So it's not this proto-state that is emerging, but it's still not a proper army and so on. I've been quite surprised the fact that they were able to launch the Palmyra and the Ramadi offensive simultaneously. But where Tony Blinken has a point is that we're still talking about a few tens of thousands of fighters, most of them foreigners, which in Syria, which makes them not a Syrian actor per se, with not an endorsement by the population in Syria as strong as in Iraq. And in Iraq, with a support from the Sunni population by default in the absence of an alternative. So that's basically where we can push on this to weaken that. He raised a very important point that Senator Goulet has worked on, which is the issue of the financing. It's probably the wealthiest terrorist organization in history because of all the money they stole in Mosul, because of all the trafficking they do with oil, antiques and all of that, and the taxes they raise on the territory they control. This is probably where we could target more efficiently that, if only to cut their oil revenue. I mean, it's unacceptable that the money, that they can still make money through exporting oil to Turkey or to Bashar al-Assad.
Is that a winnable battle? Nathalie Goulet, cutting off the funding?
Oh, yes. It's most probably the easiest way. Most probably, because we know where the money is coming from and we know where they spend it. So probably it's easier because, the networks are the same like money laundering and corruption. And we know, we already got an identification of those networks for other purpose than terrorism, but it's the same, corruption and money laundering, and especially oil and antiques also.
Christopher Dickey, follow the money?
No, I mean, let's try and cut off the money. That's a good idea. And that is the easiest thing for the West to do.
Oh, yeah.
But the problem is, that's not the real difficulty. It isn't that it's just that ISIS is rich. It's just a hell of a lot smarter than its opponents. It's dealing with a void in the Iraqi government. It's dealing with all those issues that we talked about before, which it understands much better than State Department officials do. And it is a very fast, agile military force that can figure out how to hit Palmyra and Ramadi at the same time. Where do we see any generals fighting against ISIS who have that kind of acumen?
And I have to put an additional point that they react so quickly. You know, they are acting like a video game, you know, on the social networks. They are acting so quickly on the field, and at the same time, exactly the same that they are working with Twitter, Facebook, and all those new technology. And it's exactly the same that they are playing with a video game.
Exactly what Michael was saying earlier. The Sunnis feel under huge pressure. So what is it that ISIS says to them? It's not saying to them the same thing it's saying to people in London. It's saying to them, side with us because we're the only people who are going to defend you from the Iranians.
All right, a battle to be won both over the web and on the battlefield. We're going to leave it there for now. Christopher Dickey, I want to thank you. I want to thank Camille Grand, Nathalie Goulet, and Michael Pregent for being with us from Washington. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.